Welcome, my friends, to the very soothing sake session. It's Wednesday nights. Taking some Dodger therapy sessions. Every Wednesday night, we get together, zoom into wine, and present some different wine ideas, different grape varieties, different countries, different places, and often with some different guests joining us, guest experts, and tonight is no exception. Eduardo Dingler is on the Zoom with us this evening. Hello, Eduardo. How are you, sir?
Hey everyone, I'm great. It is quite a treat to return, and thanks for the invite. Super excited to talk sake as always.
Always great to hang out with Eduardo. I have great admiration for your talents, sir. You are a multilingual world traveler, a great writer, and also involved in so many cool things, living up in the Napa Valley, the great resume. And it's wonderful to learn about something like so beautiful and so detailed as sake from you. That was my
Thank you.
meditation coach kicking in with some music there. Eduardo, we're going to cover a lot of ground on sake with this group tonight. We don't want to go too into the weeds, into the basics, but is there anything you want to say about sake in general and surmise that before we break into these 5 elite sake?
Absolutely. So I think, first of all, again, thanks, and good to be sharing a screen with you and a stage other than karaoke last time, which was phenomenal, and you killed it. That should go viral on all social media.
Better than the year before when I broke my leg, so that's good.
Oh my God. But regarding sake, and thanks everyone for joining. I mean, we will cover some ground. We'll talk about some really drastically different styles of sake. We will certainly get deep into the glass per se, but we'll cover some bases just to start. And I hope everybody has some sake or some beverage in your glass, because I can talk a little bit, but I'll cover some bases because it's always good to just refresh if you know it, and if not, it just expand and learn some new things. But sake, we'll briefly debunk some theories and some preconceived notions, if you will. So sake, what makes it different than wine or beer or a distillate is that sake is it's fermented in a way closer to beer, and we can break down into that, as opposed to wine. So the basic brief answer that I love to compare to wine is when you have grapes in the harvest season, whether you're in Napa in September or somewhere in another part of the world, in the warmth of it, ready to harvest time, you have a cluster of grapes. And let's say that cluster of grapes falls into a vessel, any vessel, right? It could be an amphora, it could be a metal, whatever vessel it is. And so chances are that grape cluster will convert into alcohol and will become wine without much intervention whatsoever, right? You'll have the sugars in the grapes, you'll have some yeast come through, start eating all the sugars and convert them into alcohol. So that's very simple. I mean, in another comparison, the marula fruit that grows in vastly in Africa, and then there's plenty of documents when you get super bored and can't sleep, want to get a laugh, you can see some drunk elephants eating it out in the wild, and they go and eat this fruit that literally just fell ripened into the ground, converted into alcohol. The elephants come, have a party, and start dancing and singing with it. So that is how wine and a lot of the fruit wines and some sort of fermentation works. Well, for sake, when you're looking at the main base ingredient being rice, that rice doesn't have those sugars. So you have pure starch. So for sake production, you need an extra character there. And there's a very strong supportive character that lives and it's utilized throughout Japan and now utilized throughout the world via Michelin star restaurants and such. This character is Koji, Koji, and perhaps you've utilized it already at your house. If not, it's quite fun, and you can find it at your local premium store. Even Whole Foods has several strains of Koji even, where you can use it to tenderize and marinate meats, and it just does its job. But in Japan, it's vastly used and historically for centuries to make soy sauce, to make miso, and distillates as well in the southern parts of Japan, mostly with shochu. But in the sake case, Koji comes in and breaks down all the starch, and it starts converting it into malleable, into glucose, sugars. So then the yeast can come and do their job and convert into alcohol. So that is basically, in a nutshell, how it works. It's closer in production to beer, if you will, but the delivery, as we'll find out, and if you haven't before, it's more wine-like, it's more refined. And what we're doing today is trying a vast range of sakes. Let's talk about, like, briefly, to give you a little intro, it's like tasting from Sancerre all the way to Madeira in some sorts. So, and everything in between. So it'll be pretty fun. I see you here, you queued up the question, hot or cold.
Yeah. I was going to say, Eduardo, because someone reminded me yesterday, they go, hey, we're receiving our tasting kits. Are any of these hot sake? And I was like, oh my God, that's a great question.
Excellent question.
And I'm so enamored by the cold sake that I forgot there was a hot sake option.
Absolutely. And there is a time and place. I mean, myself, I started drinking hot sake at my local mom and pop's place. But nowadays, there's styles of sake that are amazing when they're warm or hot, Atsukan style, where they kind of like open a door to a different dimension. Now, my rule of thumb, and something to, if you want, follow at home and anywhere you go as a rule of thumb, is always in the fridge. Always keep it cool unless you're aging sake, which is just like wine. I've become such a big fan and a big ambassador of aging sake, much like wine. So when you're getting wine and storing it, put it in your cellar with your red wines. Put it at a 55, 52, 53 degrees and forget about it. And then when you come back to it, ideally in a year or maybe 5 years, as an anecdotal thing, I recently went to this omakase place up here in Healdsburg, and I brought in a 1997 Junmai Daiginjo that I had on my fridge since one of the first times I went to Japan. Brought it back carefully in my suitcase, put her in my cellar, and I brought it up for this dinner. And people brought all kinds of stuff, Dovisat, and I mean the who's who of mostly Burgundy and all over the place. Like, it was one of those nights that you opened that night, the bottle night. So I brought that bottle, and hands down, it was the favorite beverage of the night. There wasn't enough to share. It was amazing. So when you age sake, in that case, cellar temperature, and then when you're gonna enjoy it, put it in the fridge. I could get up and show you my fridge right now and laugh. My wife hates this, but it's full of sake, right? And I love having that ready to go. And then when you come into the dilemma of hot sake, just let it warm up in your glass. Pour a glass, enjoy a little sip, and watch it open and develop, very much like, in a way, like when we open and decant a Barolo. And over the hours, you watch this wine show you like the most amazing film you've ever watched. So like that, sake is like that. So you pour a little bit, let it warm up, and start opening all those extra layers of the realm. There are some styles that are deliberately made for warming, and those are more rustic styles, not necessarily bad or cheap or bad to put on one side. It's more artisanal in some way. One of them or two that we'll have today can't be warm. However, they're amazing cold. So rule of thumb, always out of the fridge. And I wonder if I answered that. And I think there's a question in the chat here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to know mane in the beautiful Arita. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. So regarding glasses, that's a great cue up to the question. So a lot of glassware, a lot of cups from Japan, a little Arita cup right here to match you. So from Saga, the cups that are utilized for sake historically are great. They're very romantic. They're beautiful. When you go into one of the restaurants, whether it's in Japan or somewhere around here, and you get a tray and they say, pick your vessel for the night. It's amazing. I mean, I can't get enough of them. It drives my wife crazy. Every time I go somewhere, I bring new glasses. However, the best vessel to drink sake out of is a wine glass. And that is when it's a cold, chilled, just like Ian, right there. You got it down. So a wine glass, and I'll explain why, it gives you the ability to explore all the aromatics. So you give it a quick swirl, just like if it was wine, and the aromas just jump out of the glass and really express all that. When you're drinking out of an ochoko, the proper name for this one's, which again, it's amazing, it's romantic, and there's a few things about it that I'll cover, but when you're drinking out of one of these, you often can't really enjoy the full floral component and all the layers that it has. The other component is when you're sipping out of it. So if you notice, a lot of the ochokos traditionally are very thick. So glasses, as there has been experimentation and learning over the centuries, they're very thin. And the thinner the wine glass is, it's the way it hits your palate. So I was reading a study a couple of years ago that really stuck to me. And when you're drinking out of one of these, it kind of goes mutes a little bit on the palate. And you should try it if you have both vessels at home anytime, even with other beverages. And when you're drinking out of the wine glass with the thin lip, it actually goes like a waterfall and you get more of a full, sort of full effect of what you're drinking. So that is the two-sided answer to that. However, when you are in a traditional Japanese setting and you're drinking with ochokos, one of my favorite things in the world and a really explanation of how Japanese culture works is everybody has their own little ochoko, right? Whether they're tiny or a little bigger, and everybody has their own. The only rule of thumb to follow in that case is you never pour your own. So if you're in a traditional setting, whether it's a business meeting or somebody's home, and they invited you and you're like very traditional, you always watch for each other's and they watch for you. So it's a beautiful thing when it's this dance. And my favorite thing is it's never like a chore and it never feels like, oh my God, I got to watch again and check. It's very natural. You're having a conversation. All of a sudden I notice Ian's a little low. I grab the bottle, pour him a little bit. And then he'll notice if I'm a little low, he'll pour me some, but the conversation never stops. It just kind of flows. It's like a ballet. And it's really, really encapsulates the culture and what it is of Japan. And I mean, I will sacrifice having the full experience of a sake just for that alone anytime. But when you're tasting for educational, for fun, for deliciousness, a wine glass always does the trick. And bam, you don't need to go crazy out of the way for that.
Beautiful, beautiful. We've got some really exciting information for you, and please use the chat box or raise your hand and talk right on the Zoom. This is live. You're all involved. This is for you, and let's really maximize the opportunity here. But we also have to get through 5 sake.
Yes, indeed. We can go the long way.
So
let me say there is going to be questions, whether you want to ask them or not, it's okay, but we can always put them in the chat. Raise your hand, as Ian said. You can always message me. Shoot me an email, eduardo@sakedrinker.com, or on Instagram if you're there. I tend to check that compulsively, and I'm always answering. So I have a lot of friends that reach out randomly. I'm like, hey, I just sat in a restaurant, and here's the wine list. Or what do you call this style? Or how do I drink this? So any question like that, Sake Drinker is my name on Instagram. But regarding this chart, that is quite fun and colorful, if you will, I developed this because this is kind of like how I see sake production in terms of classifications. So as we know, there are hierarchy and classifications throughout the beverage world. I mean, you can talk about tequila, right? There's blanco, there's reposado, añejo, extrañejo. You can talk about Burgundy. You can say Village, Cru, Grand Cru, all these different areas. And they all depending on where you are. If you're in Italy, it could be a DOC, DOCG. All these different regulatory bodies will give a standard. Sometimes it has to be a steep hill. Sometimes it's how much you ripen your grapes. Sometimes it's how much you age it and in what vessel. for sake, those classifications come in the milling of the rice. So this is where this starts, and it's a 3-step process, as you can see here. Hopefully it makes it kind of clear. But basically, you get the rice from the after harvest, and it goes through a dehydration process. So this days and age, you can actually put it in a dehydrator, kind of like you would in a fancy restaurant, a little kiln, if you will, and do a low heat to dehydrate the rice. Or you can leave it out and let it dehydrate. I just went to a brewery a couple months ago in Toyama in the western part of Japan. And what they do and what they're really famous for is the rice, they dehydrate it outside so it gets the ocean mist. So they claim a lot of the flavor to come from the ocean, kind of just sitting there right literally across the street from the water. So you can dehydrate it many ways. You can get pretty experimental there. But after dehydration, the rice comes to the brewery or the co-op, and it's just like the brown rice we buy at the store, right? You get brown rice with the husk. And the process here in this pyramid is how you're milling away the outer layers. So the more you take away, the more purity, elegance, finesse you get in the sake per se, but not better or worse. If you only take a little bit out, you retain more flavor, more richness. So if you're like a Syrah or Cabernet drinker and you like that flavor, you want something that's less polished per se to retain a little more of the structure and the complexity. And then there's right in between is Ginjo and Junmai Ginjo. So there is a clear distinction here on the side, and without going too confusing, there's 4 ingredients to make sake, right? The 4 ingredients, let's say it's the red side on your right. So 4 ingredients are the rice, which gets dehydrated and polished to these levels. There is the water, which is very important in terms of minerality, and we'll cover that extensively in our tasting. So soft water versus hard mineral water. There's the koji that we talked about. This is our friend that's going to come in, break down all the starches and make the sugar. And there is yeast, right? And the yeast is the component that's it's elemental to produce alcohol, no matter what you're making, right? Up and down, and even bread and all those things. So yeast is going to come in, attack all the sugars, eat them, and create alcohol. And by doing so in sake, very important, it'll give you a lot of the aromatics on top of the alcoholic level and all those things. And then, so those 4 ingredients are on the red side on the right. On the left side, sake gets often and sometimes a 5th ingredient. Think about the Beatles, right? Every once in a while, they had Billy Preston back playing the keys. Not always disclosed, but some albums, and you know which ones, he was right there. So in this case, on the blue side, there's a 5th ingredient added, and this ingredient is brewer's alcohol. So brewer's alcohol gets added to the final sake after fermentation. It's unlike other beverages like port, you use it to arrest the fermentation and stop it. In this case, after the fermentation's done, you add a little bit of sake, of a little bit of alcohol, pure alcohol. Could be sugarcane is very popular, could be wheat. Sometimes some breweries get fancy and reintroduce a little bit of their distilled sake into the blend. And it has to be less than 10% by law, and then it gets watered back. So what that does, think about when you add a little bit of alcohol to something, it becomes a little more uplifter aromatics, more sharp, a little more kind of like racy. Think about like a 1950s Chevy, kind of like classic car, kind of rounder, versus as 1967 Jaguar, which is like lean, mean, it takes on the curves. So that's what it creates in the style. So Junmai on the red side, the word Junmai, if we break it down, means pure rice. Jun is pure, Mai is rice. And whenever you see Junmai on a bottle, on a wine list at a store, means it's only the 4 main ingredients, and generally tends to have a little more richness, more viscosity. That is the end game there, right? When it says Honjozo Ginjo or Daiginjo, it is 100% sure you have a little bit of brewer's alcohol added to create that style that's leaner, more aromatics, like showing up with flowers on Valentine's Day, kind of like vibrant. Not better or worse. You're not going to get a bad hangover from a Honjozo. It's just a different style. So that is a clear distinction there. And then the 3 levels, The bottom part, the Junmai or Honjoso, is when you take only a little bit, less than 30% taken away to the grain of rice. Ginjo, which is a great starting, versatile kind of crisp component range for any brewery you're looking to get into. And then Daiginjo being the purity, elegance. Now there's a double-edged sword with Junmai Daiginjo. People tend to think it's the best sake because it's the most expensive. The reason it's the most expensive is because you end up with 50% or less out of the grain of rice. So you're using more effort, more labor, more time and power to mill that down. And also you end up with half or less of the product. So that's why directly correlates to the pricing. So 50% or more price. And people tend to think it's the best one because it's more expensive. But in all reality, as I mentioned earlier, a Junmai, Honjoso, or sometimes a Ginjo tends to have a little more of that flavor, more complexity that you want with bigger dishes. And it just kind of gives you a different perspective. And we'll put it to play in effect. Thank you for moving us along, Ian. So we will start with the An Tokubetsu Junmai. So the An Tokubetsu Junmai, we are traveling all the way south, as south as we'll get today, at least. This is Okayama Prefecture. I believe there's a little map on the next slide. There we go. So Okayama sits in this little bay, very near Kobe, very near Kyoto. I mean, you can fly into Osaka and then take a train around that way. So when we're talking about this sake, and I believe hope everybody's tasting it with us right now, but you will notice a few things with this sake. As soon as you pour it right away, there's a little bit of color. It's like a little bit of a richness to it, some component of like a little bit of aging, flavor. And the reason is a few things. We're going to break this baby down. So we have a southern style prefecture, which generally gives you a richer mineral component in the water. So in this case, you have a little bit of a more weight, more delivery, but also this brewery delivers something to me since the first time I tried it. And this is one of the first sakes I started working with. And it's a style that's very much like a Chardonnay. It has almost like, you would think there's a little bit of oak in there, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of like marzipan component, some acacia, some of those flowers and things that often in my head compare you to like a Cote de Bon on a warm year, or a Sonoma Coast, or even a Carnero Chardonnay in some way. I don't know if anybody has any comments there, or just say you can say I'm crazy and you don't get any of those. It's fine. But we can move on. So Okayama Prefecture, this is a Tokubetsu Junmai. Now the word Tokubetsu, very special. You will see it in wine lists. You will see it at the store and say, whoa, what is going on here? Eduardo never mentioned. Oh, thanks, Ray. Ray Marie said, I understand the reference to Chardonnay. Awesome. Awesome. That validates I'm not going crazy. But so Tokubetsu, the word Tokubetsu means special. Now, in many ways, it's a vast word. Special Tokubetsu could mean a lot of things. In some ways, it could mean the Dalai Lama walked by the brewery. And it's sort of like an open term. It's like saying reserve in some wines where there's no real rules that apply to reserve, right? But generally, and very, very honest breweries will use the word Tokubetsu in a case like this, where what they did is they milled away, they polished even deeper than they had to on the grain of rice. So by law, as we saw on the triangle, Junmai, it's 30%. But in this case, they went all the way to 40%. So they're delivering a Ginjo level, a Junmai Ginjo level for a Junmai style. And there's a few reasons. It took me forever to understand this. Why would they do this? So there's a few reasons why a brewery would do this and call it Tokubetsu Junmai rather than calling it Junmai Ginjo. One of the reasons could be that they already have a Junmai Ginjo in their portfolio and it's different and they don't want to compete with it. But in this case, for instance, they want to deliver an even better experience and more of a bang for your buck, if you will, to the consumer by saying, this is Tokubetsu Junmai. This is a very special Junmai that's been milled away more than it had to deliver this experience and not charge you more for it. So it's pretty humble, honest, kind of modest component to it. And it's his style. So we're breaking it down. We have a Tokubetsu Junmai from the south of Japan, richer, more component. Now there's a couple other elements going on here. The rice strain that's being utilized, and take note, because this one's called Omachi, Omachi, one of the father rice strains in Japan, highly sought after. It's usually grown in Okayama and a couple little areas around there as well. And this rice strain tends to have this acidity very much in some way like Chardonnay tends to have. Like think about like when you start with Chablis and you have this persistent great acidity to it, that's how Omachi starts. So what this brewery is doing is they're milling it a little higher. They're using the local water. And then they have one more weapon under the sleeve, which is aging. They do a little bit of aging at the brewery. So they utilize the local water, higher polishing, and the Omachi rice. And then they did a little bit of aging before releasing the sake. That's where we're attributing a lot to the coloration of the sake. So they said, well, we can do this. We start with a rice strain that's grown here locally. That's contracted. Actually, some of the brewery workers in this brewery are the farmers that grow the rice. So during the summer, they grow the rice, and then they come in the winter and make the sake with the rice that they produced, which is pretty amazing to me. It's like a full cycle, full circle of life. Oh, no, this is not the sake brewery that has the rice dried in the ocean. I went to talk to them, and they're not exported yet. But okay, I will share with you as soon as it comes into the country, if it does. But this one is basically dried normally, comes to the brewery, they polish it. It's the Omachi rice. And then the aging that they do, it's giving it a little of that color, a little more oomph to it, a little more roundness that you would say, whoa, it's almost like they put a little bit of oak in here. Marzipan, a little hazelnuts, and all those notes to it. Super fun and different. And a sake that kind of it's amazing with a range of food. You could go like a little more of a beef carpaccio. You can do cacio pepe. You can do even pizza does very well with this one. I find it in my experience like pizza margarita and this sake, they're best friends. It loves cheese, especially creamy cheeses, things like that are often out of the realm of what you would pair with sake, but it's quite fun. And it just has that grip, elegance, richness that will balance with it.
I get almost a banana bread character.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You totally nailed it right there. I often get that too. Like grandma just took it out of the oven. It's just like, oof. Yeah. Very nutty and elegant and powerful at the same time in so many ways. And I think we can, if you guys don't have any other questions, we can move along to the next one.
Okay. We didn't talk through the slide.
But, yes. Thank you. So this brewery, it is, I believe, the oldest one we'll be talking about today. Imagine the brewery started in the 1700s, 14th generation, just all these layers of history that goes with that. And it's amazing. The brewery is pretty much intact. When you walk in there, it's like walking into a library, like one of those really ancient libraries. Also, another thing that it's very famous and prevalent throughout the area is they grow a lot of the denim. So that's why their label, it's sort of a blue denim component that they're kind of paying homage to their heritage and the little town's formal living in many ways. So aside from growing Omachi rice and making some great sakes, denim is kind of like the driving factor of the economy there as well.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. I really enjoy this one, and I think it's also distinctly different. And I think that it's going to be something you're going to see as a theme throughout the tasting tonight, just how different some of these are.
Pushing the envelope. I mean, there's a few styles of sake as you're switching there. This is the beautiful brewery there. There's a few styles of sake that tend to be homogeneous on what we see in the marketplace. Nothing good or bad. I'm saying like the sake industry is such a tight-knit community. It's a big family. So it's amazing to travel and see people and friends from all over the place. And everybody's promoting sake because it's such a small category. But a lot of the sakes that you see in an average wine list or or a little shop tend to be very homogenized and tend to be a little bit on the sweeter side often and have all these different notes. And I think why we picked the ones tonight is because they're really drastically bookends. And I would say even put your seatbelt for the next one because you will need it if you have one.
This sake is at 42 on the website. And
Excellent.
once we open a bottle of sake like this, Eduardo, how long is it good to drink?
I love that question. So again, if I could get up and show you my fridge. So a bottle of sake, unlike wine, like wine, let's say you have what, 3 days, 4 days pushing it, right? For a bottle of red wine, if you will. Sake is very forgiving and it has this longevity that goes on forever. When you open a bottle, you have about 3 weeks to a month almost, depending on the sake style, to deliver where it was intended to be by the brewery, by the stylistic style, right? Obviously, counting that you're opening, you're pouring a glass, you cover it, you put it back in the fridge. It maintains, right? If you're leaving it out, it'll accelerate a little faster, but still be where it was intended to be. Now, when you go past that time, and that's something I love doing at home and everywhere, is that I try to always try all my strong will not to finish a bottle of sake. I'll mark it in the back, the date, and put it in the fridge. Forget about it. So try it like a month later, 3 months later, and just see the evolution. Often with sake, what happens over that time, instead of turning into vinegar like wine does, it actually acts like it went to the gym. It starts getting richness, power, a little more layers of elegance, if you will, more comprised. So we do something at my house that's become a tradition for the last few years. When it starts getting cold around the fall here in Napa, my wife will throw like a leg of lamb or a pork shoulder or something in the crock pot and put a bunch of vegetables, cook it overnight very low, and the next day and invite a bunch of friends. Just send a group text. Hey, whoever wants to come, we have all this like amazing braised stuff that Laura loves to make. And what we'll do is we'll take out out of the fridge the oldest bottles of sake we have in there that for some reason we didn't finish and just try them with it. So often when you have all this gaminess, richness, kind of like falling apart of the meats and vegetables, it pairs amazing with some of the older sakes. And it's by far my wife's favorite exercise because it clears the fridge and we're able to put food again. And it's pretty amazing. So to wrap it up on that end, you can age a bottle of sake for a long time and just watch it evolve. And sometimes some of the best sakes I've had are a little bit of age, but 3 weeks to a month, how big is my fridge? Is not that big, James. My wife wishes it was bigger. I actually have another fridge in the garage. Three more fridges in the garage full of sake too, but those aren't open. So yeah, whenever you guys want to come and help me attack some of that sake.
Sounds like a project.
But so next we're gonna move to a whole different style of sake. So now we're in Akita. So Akita, we're in the north of Japan. Now, if you already poured a little bit and smelled it, you are in a whole different world. So you will see how different this is. And I'll explain why. This is not your traditional sake. This is, as they say, not your grandma's sake. This is a X3 Junmai Genshu with a little bit of age. So, and I'll tell you how I found this, guys, how we came across them. So Sasaki-san, who's the president of the brewery, is this wild man that lives up in the hills in Akita. And for some reason, he got notoriety in France. So a friend of mine from Napa goes to Champagne. He's so excited. He loves France. He loves French wine. He goes with his wife, goes to France, goes to Champagne to Rem, and goes to Le Crayere, which is one of the Michelin recognized restaurants in Champagne proper. And he goes to have this dinner. And he sits down, he's like, yeah, go for it, tasting menu. And then they pour him this sake. And he was so, in a jokingly way, angry that he calls me, and it's the middle of the night for me. And he's like, starts calling me, and he says, hey, dude, what the hell? I leave Napa, I come to Champagne to drink champagne, and they poured me a sake. You sake people are everywhere. So he shows me the bottle, sends me a picture, and I just went down the rabbit hole to try to connect with this Sasaki-san. So his way of making sake, he took over the brewery about 20 years ago. And since he took over, he started doing things out of the norm. He had spent some time, he actually lived in Paris for a number of years before he had to take over the brewery. So he fell in love with the whole joie de vivre, the style of food and wine and how you live in Paris. So when he came over, he said, okay, I'm ready to take over the brewery and I'm going to just draw outside the line. So he starts doing things like this one in particular. It's 3 times the koji. So what I explained earlier is that koji gets 1 addition into the rice, and then it starts breaking down all the sugars. So when you add 3 times the koji characters into one batch of rice, all this koji starts going crazy. And it just like starts breaking down even more of the starches. So then when the yeast comes, it's a complete buffet. So it's like, whoa, the yeast is going to eat until they can't anymore and just create this dense, concentrated, almost consommé style of sake. And then another thing he does is he does aging for just about 3 years of aging in tank to kind of even bring it a little more compacted. And the rice we're starting here that we're playing here with is called menkoina, which is a local red heirloom rice from Akita that gives a little bit of that coloration too. So you're going for extra umami in every way you can. So power, elegance, a lot of rumble under the hood on this sake. To me, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, to me, it's kind of like one of those dark chocolate orange shaped that you buy during the holidays that you grab and you crack, and it's all these segments that come out. My grandpa used to have those, and that's what it brings me to. It's dark chocolate, orange peel, spiced, just super powerful in that sense. So you have a lot of flavor, a lot of condensation, complexity to it. So it's amazing for a number of dishes. And the reason that Jean Georges and Ducasse and all these people are using it throughout France is because you're able to pair it with foie gras, with époisse, with dipper, like rich baked cheeses, things like that. They're like, wow, you have some powerful style here. If you get crazy and you do like a bone marrow brie hamburger at home, this is your best friend. So when you have that meatiness, the rich layer and component, but also desserts. Like you can go a chocolate dessert, you can do matcha, you can do a lot of all these things, or on its own. When you just take it out of the fridge, have a little glass of, this is one of the ones that I was saying when you warm it up a little bit, let it room temperature, it starts speaking a different language. So, and I love it in all styles. I love it warm, cold, and room temperature. It just depends on the pairing and what you're putting with it. So you can do like a country pate when you're starting with a little bit of chill, and then let it warm up and then bring out other cheeses and cornichons and all these different things. Not to go too French on it, but you can do ankimo if you're doing a Japanese sushi stuff. But anything with a little bit of more richness, like a carbonara pasta with like that density and the egg and the cheese built into it, just best friends. Let me see what.
Eduardo, have you ever had a dish that has something like a poisse with like nori flake or something on it or something like that? Because
I
that
have not, but
would be
I
so cool.
sure.
Yes.
Wow, now you're into something. Yeah, I knew you were into something. So no, that sounds amazing. So epoisse and nori, yeah,
I got to try it. This
yeah.
this this I do some cheese pairing classes and I've never
Mm.
brought a sake out, but
Ooh,
I'm gonna line this one up. I think the cheese note in the nose here is super cool.
yeah.
It certainly kind of leans into that oxidative, more dried fruit aromas, and maybe even something like a date or prune or that type of accompaniment to the cheese. Maybe even like a raisin that's been brought
Mm.
brought back into like with a syrup or something, kind of rehydrated. That would
Yes,
be really fun with this on my cheese plate, and
absolutely.
so yummy.
I am all in. You call me when I'll take a quick flight when you're
You
doing
come
that.
down, we'll make sure it happens.
Yeah.
Let me just go through the slides real quick. We're in Akita,
Hmm.
we're in the north. And
Yes. So Europe all the way in the north. So when we finally connected with him and he agreed to see us, this was January 2020. As the world started to crumble, unbeknown to everybody, we fly into Tokyo. We take a little small ship into Akita, and he picks us up in this like 70s Jeep. And he's just the coolest dude, even though he's always dressed up with a jacket and a very proper, like a hunting jacket. But he takes us up in the hills to his place. He's a hermit dude, and he starts showing us all his bottlings or his tanks and aging and how he's doing things very out of the norm, and how he's like, I just do this because this is what I like to drink. He says, I don't know, I don't care to become famous or whatnot, even though he's becoming famous because of it. But it's really definitely putting him on the map in many ways, and he's aging, blending, and yeah, fairly young brewery. This became it started in '73 as there was a merger, and then again he took it over and started winning awards throughout in London, in France, and places like that. He has a couple other sakes that I highly recommend, and we can talk about him next time. But he has an assemblage, which is just a base blend, almost like a champagne blend, livelier, fun, a little bit of hint of like sherry, but very stone fruity, food forward. And then he has other ones. He has one that I love that's aged in a chestnut barrel. So think about it as almost whiskey-like, and it's like elegant, nutty chestnut, but really things out of the way, which a lot of people in Japan that are very traditional as a culture, they've looked at him and be like, oh man, this guy needs to go into the asylum. He's crazy. But people outside and a lot of young people are quite celebrating his style of pushing the envelope out of the way.
there's almost like a slatey, stony
Mm-hmm.
too, and it's very cool. I could see why Champagne Michelin
Yeah.
3-star restaurant would want to pour this type of is that a 3-star?
Yes, it is. It is the only 3-star in REM, I believe.
That's amazing.
Yeah, super fun. So this is their koji room at the brewery, very traditional. So what you do here, and it's great as an education. So all these little cubbies you see on the sides, that's where the steam rice. So let me backtrack real quick and give you a quick, tell me if I'm going too slow or we're running out of time. But so the rice comes into the brewery, gets polished away to the level, and then it goes into a giant steamer. And it's like, imagine grandmas making rice for a whole village. So they put it in this huge pot, often still heated by wood, by burning wood, but other times it's like a little gas. So you heat it up, steam it, take it out, and then you split the batch in two parts. One batch goes out and just chills out for a little bit. The other batch gets really lucky and goes into this room, which is the koji room. It's like a sauna room. It's always warm with high humidity. And what you do is you lay all the rice on this table you see, and they vary a little bit. Traditionally, they can be like all wood panels all around, very much like a sauna. Other ones are, I just visited one recently that was all stainless steel and just spotless, but they all have this different touch to it that adds a lot to the flavor. So you lay the rice that's been steamed, still warm, on this table, and then in a very ceremonial way, you sprinkle the koji spores all throughout the rice, and then you break it down into little patties, put them in these cubbies on the sides that you see individually, like little babies in a cheesecloth, if you will, and then let it there and just monitor the temperature and make sure that the koji is doing all its job at the same time and evenly. So that is basically like an elemental room for every sake brewery.
That is a lot of work.
Yes, it is. And it's often the work of the master sake brewer that's been doing it for decades. I've worked at a few breweries for a few days at a time, and I've never even asked about being in charge of that job because it's very special and painstaking. I've done everything else. I'm still sore from the last visit where I was carrying buckets of rice up the tanks and watering and cleaning stuff. But yeah, this is a very special ceremonial part of the equation. Yeah, some of their sakes they make a plum sake that's pretty fun too. Yeah, he gets out there. And when you guys go to Japan, I highly recommend a visit. Although he's up and he don't expect like a a super experience of a brewery, but you will get to see like hands-on taste out of tanks and see. I mean, I have to ask, but I'm sure he will. He's a very open guy once you get to know him. He's fantastic. Yep, and a little bit of the notes on why and how the X3 is happening here, how it's concentrating and the aging and all the power to it.
We're 55 on this.
Which is insane. If you're comparing it to a Sauterne or a wine of that caliber, you're getting a lot of wine for this, a lot of sake.
Yeah, that's really fun. Eduardo, just a quick commercial on my side. We've been super hard at work, and I'm so excited when it's right about now, all the work starts to connect, and we got a lot of marketing out there. Our postcard, because of the 4th of July, didn't get here until now, and they ordered 2,500 postcards. In the mail today, in the mail today, I got 25,000 postcards.
Oh my! Wow!
You know how many postcards that is? And I wondered why it was taking so long. And they made the mistake, and they just sent me all the postcards that they made. So
wow!
That anybody wants a box of soon to expire postcards?
What do you use those for?
Well, the 2,500 would go pretty fast, passing them around and stuff. But 25,000, oh God, it's
Should we
taking.
send them to the whole country?
I'm thinking about getting into paper mache, or potentially covering my walls with these postcards.
There you go.
Effect. But we have this amazing tasting next Thursday night here in Los Angeles. 39 wineries, 115 Pinot Noirs. We're buying out the entire restaurant, test restaurant, which will have, looks like we're going to sell out at approximately 200 guests. And it's going to be super. Legendary DJ Richard Blade is going to be playing the music. We have Matt Ketman from Wine Enthusiast hosting a special early dinner feature at 6 o'clock. We have a 6:30 early access tasting, and then 7 and an 8. The 8 o'clock is $79, and then they get more expensive as you get more food and even more dinner. So check out the tasting and the lineup of the wines. We worked so hard on this, and I will be very proud of the wines that night. There's no very large producers, lots of really good high-end producers, and lots of winemakers coming. So it's going to be really fun. Next week's Zoom, which is the night before Stars of Pinot. If I look withdrawn and baggy eyes next Wednesday night, it's because we'll be working on that. But we have an incredible lineup of Chenin Blancs from around the world. Some amazing Sauvignon, some great stuff from South Africa, from Santa Barbara. I think you're going to be really impressed with the Chenin presentation next Wednesday. And I'm not sure how many kits remain, but it's doing well, and it will sell out very soon as well. So join us for Chenin Blanc next week. Sake.
Awesome. All right.
Ian,
So
I just wanted to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Does sake have an APV like wines do? Do we know, the percent alcohol by volume?
Absolutely. On average, sake is about the 15, 16.
Oh, okay.
You can get some sakes as low as like 7, like Riesling you would, and then some as high as 22. If it's a Genshu, meaning undiluted, just pureness, and the yeast was very strong, you can get to 20, 22 easy.
Wow.
But on average, 16, and I'll tell you briefly. So the Kinmon is 15, the one we just had.
Okay.
The An is 16, the first one. And the Imayo Tsukasa Black that we're tasting now, it's also 15. Actually 16.
Okay.
But yeah, it kind of varies from there. But yeah, today's actually, they're all kind of laying in that realm. So this one is definitely, again, we're not like the others. And this one is one of the ones that lives in my fridge all the time and actually does get consumed fully. So this is this is one I can't practice restraint. And there's many reasons for it. It's a super dry style. So there's a scale called SMB, sake meter value. In Japanese, it's called Nihonshudo. And breweries tend to put it in their labels to kind of give you a little bit an idea of the level of sweetness or dryness, right? It's a dilution of the viscosity of the water of the sake. The scale usually tops at +10, and then it minus like 5. Higher is drier. That's the one thing to remember if you're like looking at a list and you're like, whoa, I don't know what I want, but higher is always drier. So +10, you're looking at a pretty fairly dry style. This is actually +15 on the scale. So you have a super dry style, meaning there's no sugar pretty much remaining. This is a powerful yeast combined with some selection of koji that the brewery does. And the style that it delivers is, I call it the absence of fruit. So coming back from the last one and even the an, this is like a complete reset. This is clean, crisp, mineral, very electric style component of sake. First time I tried it, my brain didn't know what to do with it. I was thinking like somewhere around the Sancerre camp, Loire, kind of like, but in the tension in the palate, right? Kind of like that jolt of energy that carries you. But on the palate itself and the aromatics are like, you have to try to find them there. You're looking at, so I often get a little layers of shiitake mushrooms, a little bit of dark chocolate, shavings, cocoa nibs, a little bit of caramel in the nose without on the sweet, but like torched. But it's just a complete absence of fruit. This one is just clean. The brewery loves to promote it with steak, which has become one of the most fun topics. And living in Napa Valley, and every once in a while I'll secure some tomahawks and invite some people, and chances are people will show up with their Cabernet that they made or they sell or something. And it's always a discussion where people often don't leave happy, but we'll have tomahawk steaks, salt, pepper, and then grill it and then try them against these wines and the sake. And people they're like, wow, how is it a sake like this pairs so well when we've been preaching that Cabernet is the best friend with steaks? And it's amazing the way it kind of like interacts with it. It breaks down the fattiness. It loves a little bit of charcoaly chard in the ends, but you can do like shiitake mushrooms or eggplant or other things out of the grill too. And it's just amazingly best friend. Something this baby doesn't like is sweetness. So I've tried it with many things, but if you have like some ripe strawberries from the farm stand or like a dessert or anything with a little tinge, it just kind of fights it a little bit. It brings out a little bit of more of a Gruner character with a little bit of radish and things like that I find. But anything with steak or on its own, or I have friends that actually what they do is they'll pour some and stir it in ice and then put a couple olives, just like a martini, just on its own. And it just has all the power under the hood in that style. Super dry. So we're like experimenting all the opposite side over here.
Sakatini.
Sakatini without anything else, just the olives. Maybe an option.
That's fun. Let's take a look at a couple of slides here. Here comes now we're in Niigata.
Niigata. So Niigata, it's the area, as you can see there, right in the central western part of Japan. Now, very important for knowledge and for trivia questions. Niigata, out of the 47 prefectures or regions of Japan that you can see they're delineated throughout the country, out of all of them is the area of Japan with the highest number of breweries. You have 90 breweries where pretty much every prefecture that you see in there makes sake, but sometimes in some places it's only one brewery, some others is 3, but in this case, 90 of them. So imagine this concentration in this little sliver of land, right? So there's a few reasons why. Historically, I mean, the records indicate like back to the 1400s, there was some settlements and some people starting to make sake in a different fashion, but started to produce it. Huge boom in the 1800s during the Meiji period, where the emperor kind of promoted sake production because two reasons. He really loved it, but also he loved getting the tax from all those breweries, so it made the country richer. But during this time, there was a huge boom. A lot of the breweries just kind of grew. And the reason of this settlement of breweries in this area is it's a couple things, but the most important is the Echigo Mountains. So the Echigo Mountains is this mountain range that cuts through the country. You can kind of start in the north in Akita, and then Yamagata, which is directly north, which we'll cover more in a little bit. And then you can go to Nagano. If you remember, like the Winter Olympics, Nagano and Akita and all these places had a lot of the action happening on the skis and snowboards and all that, because high elevation, high peaks, record number of snow, and all this snow, as it comes down these mountains, these Alps, it provides pretty pristine, tension, silky kind of style of water that's ideal for sake production. So this area kind of has collected that. Next time you're in Japan, if you're there in March, I cannot recommend enough this festival called Sake no Jin. I try to go every year, and it's a festival in the heart of Niigata where all the breweries participate. They bring their booth, you go around, you taste sakes, and you talk to them, and then you get a little bit of food, and then you sit down and eat and buy a bottle of sake, and it's amazing. And you get to really see the contrast and comparisons between all the producers, and it's fascinating. It's a great culture of meeting not a lot of foreigners, but when they see somebody that's not from there, they highly roll the red carpet and celebrate that you're there. So be prepared for that and be overpoured in many ways.
Very nice.
Yes. So this brewery started in the 1700s, and this is a beautiful kind of, like, as I mentioned, crisp, schisty style, and a variety of pairings, as you can see here. So this is the ancient part of the brewery. It's sort of become more of a museum area from last time I was there. And I'll get more in depth about this brewery as we taste the last one, because that'll make a lot of sense. But yeah, a pretty fascinating little experience they have right in the heart of Niigata.
The nose on this particular sake seems almost more, because the first two were so extreme and so wild. It seems a little bit more like right down the middle in the nose. It's like more like what you'd expect from a sake. And but it's dry, obviously, and there's almost like it's almost like a saline character, and that I liked your initial comparison to like a Sancerre, very crispy, very focused, and I like this one quite a bit as well. We're at back to $42 here, and that is the Black Junmai, Niigata.
My Tsukasa Black.
Yeah.
Fun, easy drinking for every day. I love it. It just resets me. It also, in a lot of ways, coming from a wine world, it bridges to me that gap where it has that kind of tension and the acidity that we often miss that's in wine, right? Like when you go from like a chacoli to a sake, a traditional sake, you miss that kind of like tension in there. It makes your mouth water.
And I think it's maybe the word isn't correct in saying restraint, but the nose kind of, you almost have to dive into the glass to smell it, because it's
exactly
so different than the first two, which had no restraints.
No, exactly. They were just like unapologetically big. It's like bull in a china shop.
All right. Very cool. Love learning from you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And thanks for the time. And thanks everyone for joining. So next, we're going to go into a tetekube, if you will. This is like one of the higher end expressions from this lovely brewery located in Yamagata. So as you saw, and I briefly pointed, you'll see in the map, Yamagata is directly north of Niigata. And this is a style. This is a Junmai Daiginjo. So now we're getting into that Junmai Daiginjo world, more expressive, more powerful, silky, elegant, but a style that even, especially going from the last one to this, you pour it, you don't even have to like swirl it. It just jumps out of the glass, right? It's this floral kind of like foresty component that's really beautiful. Anise, licorice, grapefruit, a lot of going on there. This is like a Grand Cru burgundy kind of component to it, right? It's just tension, schist, a lot under the hood. This producer, they are in the Yamagata Mountains. And when you go from Niigata to Yamagata, it's even like when you're right on the base of Niigata and you take the train, you just go steep. It's like going, if you feel like almost like you're going on a roller coaster ride, but you're just going up. And you're just waiting for like, when are we going to stop? Because you're just on a steep climb. A lot of the breweries are settled on the higher areas. Niigata or Yamagata it's a land of cattle. There's a lot of cattle being raised there, consumed. Not a lot of it makes it out of the country. It's such highly sought after, and you go to amazing steakhouses for Wagyu and such, but it just all gets completely taken in there. Jason and Julie, is this 4 or 5? This is 4, I believe, right?
Nope.
Are we?
Good question. I'm following the slideshow, but I feel like we're tasting. I'm going to double check real quick. Okay, I'm going to pour the next one and see what's going on here.
Excellent.
Thank you. Sorry for the possible confusion. Let me make sure we're right.
That's just part of the fun.
Yeah, this is the correct one. This is number 4.
Oh, excellent. Beautiful. Yeah, so Yamagata grown.
The slide that says it's number 5 is incorrect. This is number 4.
Excellent. So, couple things happen here in Yamagata. Oh yeah, Amy, right on the grapefruit. Totally right. It's just like ruby red grapefruit, like when you squeeze the zest a little bit. So Yamagata is on the high elevation. These people here are all about preserving, as a band of brewers all together, they preserve the attributes, the local ingredients, and the way they do things. So Yamagata is the first area in Japan to get a GI designation, which you see right here. This is the symbol. And it's basically a geographical indication that we know from like tequila or certain cheeses or champagne that has to be grown and made in that place and protected. And when, as a consumer, you see this label, this little stamp there, you know that it's gonna have all the attributes from local domestic rice and the stylistic preferences of that area. And it's pretty rigorous process. It goes through a panel of blind tasting to get that stamp. So they banded together as a group of brewers from their prefecture and went to the government and went to the international bodies and said, we want to get this stamp. And now, since they started, there's 23 other prefectures that have managed to get their stamp of approval and recognition worldwide, if you will, for their style and how it differentiates from other places. So it's kind of really cool and a great process. So this is 100% Dewasansan rice. Dewasansan is their highest level of rice production and more elegant style that they can make and grow in the region. This is, again, Junmai Daiginjo, but this one is actually polished even higher than they had to. So by law, it has to be 50%. This is to 35%, just a smidget of the rice strain remains. So when you're thinking about the process and the polishing and how they're getting there and why, they identified as a brewery that this is like the cherry on top of their production. And it produces the style that it's still, to me, it's like super mouth-watering. It doesn't miss anything. It quite elegant and purity and fun. So Yamagata right there. I was at an event with Sean White. Well, he happened to be there. And we were, of course, talking about sake because that's all I talk about most days. And we started talking about it and drinking sake. And he said, oh, I love Yamagata because I started going there when I was like 6 years old. My mom used to take me there to snowboard. And that's where it kind of like all started. We would go there in the winter. And then now I go and drink the sake there. So I thought that was pretty cool and kind of like in my head, it kind of wrapped around like, oh, well, that makes sense because there's all these high peaks, a lot of snow, very pure, and it's kind of like a lot of virgin areas where you can go and just snowboard away with no restraints, unlike some other parts of the world like Switzerland or Colorado, right?
Got it.
Super tiny brewery. This is Okitama, and it's beautiful. I think you have a slide there that it's a very romantic little brewery. In a way, when we got there, it was like super snowy the first time we visited, and it looked kind of like the scene from Kill Bill, like the rice paper and the whole thing, and it was just beautiful, very romantic. It's a super microbrewery. There's only 6 people working there, and when we went the first time, like grandma was there putting the labels on the bottles. It was like that kind of operation where everybody gets involved, every bottle gets touched by everyone. But the coolest thing I did when I first visited is that they had me drink the water out of the faucet. And when you drink it out of the hose right there, you really realize how the water has so much to do in this case, where it gives it that viscosity and richness and roundness to it. And it really gives it the structure to the sake itself. Really, really fascinating. Yeah, I love this.
Very polished, very like elevated. You can really taste some of the better marks here. The intensity as well.
Absolutely. This is a celebratory sake that I try to kind of like save and keep in my cellar for the special occasions. If I could afford it, I would drink it every day because, again, it has that focus, sharpness to it, and without lacking any of the florals that you would expect from Junmai Daiginjo and the Yamagata style. Really, really fun. I hope you guys are enjoying this one. And by the way, that's a very low ball price. I've seen this sake about $180 in some places, if not higher. So that is a steal.
I'm gonna check online and make sure I'm not losing money because
I know you should. I might be mistaken, but last time I saw it online, it was like 150, 180, at least higher.
All right, I gotta check. So buy it tonight because it's going away.
Tomorrow, $200.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We got one more.
Yes. So last but not least, this is the koi. So as you can see by the bottle, it is undeniably attractive in some ways. So this is how we fell in love and we found this brewery. So we get to Niigata Station in Niigata proper, get out of the bullet train, the Shinkansen, and we are actually on a mission to go visit this other brewery. And we're running okay on time, but we like to always be in Japanese time, which means early. And the doors open to after getting out of the train, and there's this boutique shop with sake with a full display of these guys. And you could imagine me. I ran straight to the store and I said, hold on. And went and asked the sake shop. And I said, hey, what's up with this sake? I've never seen it. It's fascinating. And I would love to like taste it. And they said, oh, well, we're not even going to open a bottle here because the brewery, it's not even a mile from here. You should go visit them in person. And I said, sure. So they gave us the address. We managed to postpone the next brewery. We just told them, hey, we're going to be late. We ran with our bags straight to the little sake brewery shop. And they have an amazing experience. So the picture you showed there earlier, it's their museum part, which shows you a depiction of how sake is made and how it used to be made and all these things. However, their experience is insane. Coming from Napa and being to a lot of wineries all over, a lot of wine regions all around the world, you start experiencing the experience and stuff. But these guys, the way they do it, this is the building. You walk in, the first time I went, they had an olive oil and sake pairing and a chocolate and sake pairing. And they're kind of like expanding the horizons. They had oysters and sake there fresh from the bay. All these different things that are like, whoa, I think we have a lot to learn. Because the average sake brewery, it doesn't have this. They're a working sake brewery. You go in there, they might have a little corner in the front where you just literally stand there and taste the sake. It's not a sit-down, fancy couch, anything. But these guys, as they prepare the whole thing, you go and taste around, and they're masters at packaging, as you can see. So that was our main concern, is we see the packaging, and and we're immediately drawn to it. But often when you see a beautiful bottle of tequila or wine or whatever you're looking at, and it's like, wow, I hope they didn't spend all the money on the packaging, right? So it makes you wonder. So we go in there, we barge in, we say, hey, so sorry, but we'd love to taste the sakes. And it was incredible. So this sake to us, it's a Junmai Daiginjo Genshu, which means undiluted. They didn't water back at all. So it captures the elegance, the kind of like precise component, but also it's rustic. This is not a floral, darling, kind of like beautiful sake like the last one, as we saw. I don't know if you agree, but this one is a little more masculine in some way, and it allows to play with bigger dishes. You're allowed to play with like some pasta, some meats, maybe veal piccata, things like that, where it's like grasps, and you're not worried about overpowering the sake in some way. So this one is Junmai Daiginjo Genshu, as I mentioned. It's made with local rice. And what they're doing here is 50%, but I love their play with the packaging and the words. So koi, because, and yeah, this is one of the ancient parts of the brewery from the 1700s, where they used to actually make the sake. And it doesn't look that much different now, but this is the experience right there, where you're looking at as you walk in. They're masters at design and packaging and all this beautiful styles. And they're the same producers as the black. Let me backtrack a little bit there. So same guys. So the koi thing here, why koi? Niigata is one of the largest places of production of farming of koi fish. So if you buy some koi fish from a pond and it came from Japan, chances are it came from this region. And it's fascinating. And when you go out there into the little towns of Niigata, you get to see like in the canals, and you see a lot of koi celebration, if you will, become kind of like the symbol of the area. You have right here in the corner is the prefecture map of Niigata and Sado Island right there. And another thing with the koi and the play of words, back in the 1800s, the breweries used to sell sake in a glass container, or like a little a big vessel, if you will, right? They weren't bottling, much like in Bordeaux. They would sell the casks to the British, and they would take them and then bottle it somewhere near, right? So the breweries would sell the sake in a bigger container, and then by the time it got to the shop or the restaurant and the house, by the time you actually got the sake in your glass, they're saying it's so watered back, because everybody kept cutting it back a little bit, that a koi fish could live in there. So that's their whole play on words here. They're saying this is a Genshu, we didn't water back at all, and a koi fish could not live here. So it's kind of like their play on words. And it's not that high in alcohol. It's 17, which is actually the highest so far. No, actually, the Benten is also 17. So these two babies are 17. They're on par. But kind of like captures that elegance. I often get a play of between Meyer lemon, marmalade, and a little bit of Parmesan cheese rind, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a little power, funk, elegance. But this is a sake that makes an impression, not only on the packaging, but in the way it just delivers that component. Number of cheeses, you're talking about a little more dry cheeses do really well with it, as opposed to like the Kinmon, which needs a little more power. This one you can do like pecorino, you can do Parmesan, you can do a number of those cheeses where you're just putting on a little spread. Sushi-wise, a lot of the creamy dishes do really well. A lot of the big, like otoro, you can even do wagyu with this one. Just a slice of sashimi of wagyu with nothing on it. Best friends, because it just kind of like embraces the fattiness to it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And yeah, the bottle is stunning.
Yes.
An incredible gift, actually, to give
Absolutely.
sake. It's a bestseller in my store, amongst the sake. Even though it's more expensive, it still outsells the other sakes. And I think it's a great find. The quality is there. The beauty, the expectation is, you expect a good sake, and you got a good sake as well. So it kind of fulfills on all the checks all the boxes, and I'm really happy to have it in the store.
We're thrilled you're enjoying it. Yeah, it's pretty captivating. It opens the door into that other realm, and it's looks fun. A lot of people when you show up with it to like a party or a gathering, everybody turns around. It's like, okay, I'm gonna put down my Grover champagne for a second, and let's see what that is first. So it's kind of fun.
Any questions for Eduardo?
Hope you guys are enjoying the journey.
Thank you. What's next for you, buddy? What's next in your travel and your work?
Oh my God, it's been a little crazy. So this year has been
on social media between bottle, what is it, Bottle Rock or something like that?
Oh, Bottle Rock was a lot of fun. That was one of the few instances I've been home. This year has been a lot of January was mostly Mexico, March was all Japan back to back. And then April and May were mostly Europe, a lot of Mediterranean, Italy and Spain. Last month was mostly New York. This month, a little bit of Palm Springs and working on a project there. And then where are we heading? I think back to Europe in August. But yeah, trying to stay put and spreading the sake word everywhere we can. And I have to get back to Japan hopefully September for a couple of reasons. We just did a huge fundraiser here in Napa, in which they kind of pushed me to do a lot, including a trip to Japan. So it sold very well. There was actually a Harlan lot with the Harlan family. There was tickets to a Taylor Swift show, like VIP and the whole thing. And I beat both of those. I don't know how, but my lot went for $35,000. And I'm bringing 3 people, and we're just gonna go. Not your tourist guide kind of a component. This will be like all holes in the wall, my favorite coffee shops, bars, sake breweries, shrines. So it'll be a lot of fun. So that's on the works for the later in the year. And yeah, just having fun and doing things like this that really light my fire.
That's great. Well, love learning from you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
But James asked a question. You mentioned aging sake. How do you identify an appropriate one to age?
To age? Oof, I would say go crazy. Thank you. I would say there's no real rhyme or reason or which ones to age. And I'll tell you that from experience, like the Kinmon would be an ideal candidate because it's already aged, right? So it kind of gives you a little more. I would say in some cases, some sakes are vintage sake where they'll have a vintage on them and a date, but other times you just have to mark it for your own records because not all of them do. But as I mentioned, that Daiginjo that I brought from 1997, against all odds, we would have ever thought to age as a Daiginjo, but this one was just firing all cylinders. It was delicious. But rustic, more richer styles are also pretty easy to age. And Nama, which is undiluted styles, as opposed to what everybody thinks is that they're drink fresh and vibrant. They're amazing with a little bit of age because it tames down the fruitiness and it makes it a little more serious in some styles. So yeah, I would say have fun. Just age anything you can. Just keep trying it.
The question came up too about, is there already a date on here, like a born on date or anything like that?
Some do, but not by law. So for instance, the Benten, it's right here.
This one says bottled in 2022.
Yep. 22, a little bit of bottle aging, and then they ship it. But yeah, so a little bit of aging kind of. I lately tasted a koi that was bottled in 18. And man, that was fun because it kind of like collected more, took out a lot of the fruit and made it serious. It was really delicious. Yeah,
Cool.
some do. You will notice, and you will see if you go to your local sake shop and visit Ian and stuff. Hopefully, you'll start seeing more vintage sakes out there too, which kind of give you an idea of why and how they're meant to be drank at a little bit of age.
Thank you, Eduardo. We really appreciate your time. It was wonderful, great tasting. Love the products, and you're a stud. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure, guys, and we'll be in touch. Thanks for all you do. Cheers.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Great night, everybody. Go Dodgers.